And hello and welcome to show 75. We got a whole lineup of stories here waiting for you, the listeners here of MLB This Week. Hello and welcome to MLB This Week. It's a weekly podcast talking all about baseball. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And I'm joined each week here with Gary Mack, an excellent broadcast buddy of mine from in the New York area. And Gary, again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Rich, and everybody out there. I got my Christmas hat on. I'm all set. A little Mets Christmas spirit going on here, and glad to be with you once again.
Yes, indeed. And happy Hanukkah to all our listeners out there, and whatever other holidays there are around this time. It's the holiday season, so we don't want to leave anybody out. And Gary, this day we're trying a dual podcast here on the video end, using a new service called blab.im for sort of the making of how we do this podcast.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to play with it a little bit more, Rich, but hope it works. We got to figure out a way of getting both broadcasts onto the Blab, and I'm trying to see if I can get on the Blab with my laptop so you can have me on there, but we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. I had set up a laptop with a another USB cam, but it's only taking the feed off of the laptop for the making of via the Blab. So anyway, we're happy to be here on Google Hangouts, and also you can listen to the show on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and over at our website. It's called MLBThisWeek.com. You can hear all of our shows, and we sort of put together a week of news stories and opinions about what we think the biggest stories in baseball have been. So we hope you sit back, listen to the show, and enjoy it. And we also want to invite you to visit our Patreon page over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/MLB This Week. You can subscribe to the show, send us some listener support that way, $1 or $3 a month, whatever you want to part with here, and we can bring some of these great new ideas and ways of podcasting to you. And Gary, let's start off by answering a question that we had right off the bat here from Blab, which is a new service here. Quick thoughts on the Giants' new rotation there in San Francisco.
Well, Rich, the Giants definitely made some moves to shore up that rotation with Samardzija and Cueto, and they're going to be in a pretty good position. They're going to be in a better position than they were this year with some of the pitching that you have. And the interesting thing is their depth, what they're going to have beyond the starting five. And don't know much about their minor league system or whatever, but the starting five looks pretty good. They got that young kid. His name escapes me now, but the kid that threw the no-hitter against the Mets, he's going to be back for a full year. And who knows who else they're going to bring back. They could always bring back Lincecum. I don't hear a lot about him on the open market, so who knows? Maybe they'll bring him back. Matt Cain's going to be back, and of course, as we said, Samardzija and Cueto should look to fill that out quite a bit, and I think they've had one of the better winters, and we'll discuss this a little later about a couple of the teams that I think are really had terrible winters so far. It's still time to do some things, but boy, Rich, if you need pitching, I think now in the free agent market specifically, the pickings are pretty thin at this point.
Yeah, that's for sure. Better part of the pitching's already gone, and as you said, the Giants. I'm on their website here. The depth chart reading Bumgarner, of course, Cueto, Samardzija, Jake Peavy, Matt Cain, and Heston rounds up 6 starters for them so far. So, yeah, they've improved themselves greatly over the offseason. They didn't get Greinke, but maybe that wasn't the piece of the puzzle that was meant to be for the San Francisco Giants. But with Cueto, I have a story on him later on in the podcast as well. So it's going to be an interesting show here as we are doing our last podcast of the year, leading up to the brand new year of 2016. And Gary, it seems like it gets here faster and faster every year.
Well, Rich, you got a point there. As you get older, the days just seem to go by quicker and quicker. And boy, it just seems like it was Thanksgiving. I was thinking this before, and all of a sudden now it's Christmas, and it's only like 3 days away, and I still have some Christmas shopping to do. So I'm a little frazzled right now, but not too much. It's just a tiny bit, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, it just comes awfully quick now. Before you know it, we'll be talking about training camp, spring training, and the rosters that will fill out the teams. And boy, can opening day be too far behind?
Not really. It just seems like every week goes by like a snap of a thumb. And as you said, it'll be we'll be talking about spring training before you know it. One guy that we won't be seeing in any spring training venues or any Major League Baseball parks any more this season, it seems to be Pete Rose, Gary, and he's our first story up this week. Pete Rose, again, banned from baseball, that being affirmed by the commissioner 25 years after the initial ban in 1989, and nothing's changed with Pete Rose. It seems like there was a ray of light that may allow him back into baseball. And this past week, last Monday, actually, a day after we did our last podcast, was officially announced that the ban still holds. So everybody out there that is a Pete Rose fan will have to wait probably forever for a reunion with Pete Rose in baseball. I think this is probably the last time we'll hear Pete Rose being considered for a readmission into baseball.
Well, Rich, I'm not so sure it's going to be the last time. I think a lot's going to go on. What happens with this whole DraftKings thing? If they are ruled to be a gambling site, could Pete Rose put in another application and say, you know, they talk about gambling, how bad it is, and I understand that it's the cardinal sin of baseball. And I understand that every clubhouse has the Rule 21 hanging in there, that is the ultimate cardinal sin, betting on baseball. But then how does baseball put a multi-million-dollar piece of money into DraftKings? And they do. They have a big financial stake in DraftKings. And I just don't understand it. Now they can keep him out for the reasons that they're keeping him out, that he still bets on baseball and that he bet on baseball. Times are changing, and if they're going to do this kind of thing, then it's up to them to really acknowledge the fact that, hey, we're just as guilty as he is now. But they continue to charade that it's not gambling, DraftKings, and tell that to the 5 states and New York who's trying to get it banned for gambling, and it's 5 stakes, and they could lose a lot of money, MLB, because they have a financial interest in this thing. But it's just, you know, admit it to us and let the guy in, because it really looks silly at this point to say, no, Pete, you can't come in because you gambled on the game, and it's almost like Manfred makes the announcements, and then and this section has been brought to you by DraftKings. It's just foolish. It's ridiculous. They're advocating gambling, but yet they're keeping a man out for gambling on baseball. It makes no sense to me anymore.
Yes, it does. That's for sure. Manfred concluded in his report, and this is a quote: "Mr. Rose has not presented credible evidence of a reconfigured life, either by an honest acceptance by him of his wrongdoing, so clearly established by the Dowd report, or by a rigorous, self-aware, and sustained program of avoidance by him of all the circumstances that led to his permanent ineligibility in 1989. So basically what he's saying is Pete Rose hasn't been apologizing enough, according to him, and has not stayed away from gambling either. Of course, Rose has based himself out of Las Vegas, where he has a lot of business ties, and he makes a lot of his money that he still lives on right out of Las Vegas. And he hasn't made it a secret that he even gambles on baseball, as he has over the past few years even. So those little facts haven't really helped Rose all that much. If 25 years is enough for him to have served a ban from baseball, most times in the legal world, at least 20 years is considered a lifetime, I would think, but not for baseball. So Pete Rose still banned, but my personal feeling is we probably will never see him admitted into baseball, probably in our lifetimes. Maybe in 50 years from now they'll rescind something, but I don't think the current climate is going to allow for any acceptance back into baseball ever.
Well, the craziness is it too, Rich, is that he's all over the Hall of Fame. I mean, his bats, his balls are there, his spikes, his uniform, his helmet. I mean, it's all there. To deny this guy the rightful place is just ridiculous. And, the Hall of Fame technically can put him in. They passed a rule that they could change that said that they will not put anybody in that's on the lifetime ban list. However, they can change that rule. They could put him in. They can vote him in. It is two separate entities. Manfred even suggested it that. He said it's two separate entities. If they put him in, there's nothing baseball can do about it. And I don't know why. Maybe someday somebody will have the courage to put this guy in, and then see what they say. Again, I guess they'd have to change that. I don't know whether it's a written law rule that they have to go by, the writers, but technically and theoretically, they can put him in the Hall of Fame while he was still on baseball's ban list.
Yes, they could, and that doesn't seem to be likely, as I did read that there was a 1991 vote by the Hall of Fame not to admit anybody into the Hall of Fame that is currently banned by baseball. So they do have a rule in effect limiting that scenario, but as you said, Gary, nothing is in concrete, and they could vote to change that rule as well. So it's just something we're going to have to keep our eye on. And I think we're in the corner of Pete Rose, but there's still a whole lot of other fans out there that have a total different opinion of him. They don't really feel that he should have a second chance, or a chance after he has violated the rules of baseball, and didn't seem to be very well, what's the good word for that? Remorseful about it, possibly. So for now, Pete Rose is looking from the outside in on baseball. And I'll have to tell my story again for listeners that are just tuning in. They haven't heard my story on Pete Rose. One of the best baseball players I've ever met in person. I was able to talk to him for a minute or so and just tell him he was the best. So, Pete Rose, one of the greats of the game for sure.
That's for sure. And again, it's not quite a Hall of Fame if it doesn't have the Hit King in there.
Well, moving on to our next story here on MLB This Week, your weekly podcast about baseball. And I might have to add that we're unofficial, not sponsored by any team or MLB itself. We're just an independent show, bringing up the stories we think you may have glossed over during the week, some important stories. And Gary, another important story of the past week was a guy who has been waiting to sign with the team, and he finally did.
Yeah, but it's not the team we thought he was going to sign with, Rich. Hisashi Iwakuma, he came to an agreement with the Los Angeles Dodgers on a 3-year deal, but it was never finalized. And apparently the Dodgers didn't like what they saw on his physical, so they backed away from the deal, and Iwakuma turned around and signed back with the team that he was with, the Seattle Mariners. He signed a 1-year deal with vesting options for 2017 and 18. The terms were not announced, but it was pretty quick after the Dodgers seemed to turn him down. And, as we say, we're going to talk about the winners and the losers, but I don't know. This has been an amazing offseason for me. Just to see the people that have either turned down trades or moved teams. I thought Greinke was a sure thing to go back to L.A., and he turns around and goes to Arizona. Just amazing the things that have gone on this offseason so far. And this is another one. They had him signed, didn't like the physical, and apparently he took a physical on an exiting physical from Seattle at the end of the year. And apparently they're not too concerned about whatever the Dodgers saw. And so he's back with the Mariners.
So an interesting signing there in the offseason. And I've noticed a lot of MLB players from the United States also going over to Japan to play in 2016. You can find those transactions happening every day. So it's a back and forth type of thing. I haven't really paid attention to too many of the foreign stars that are coming over here to play in 2016. I'll have to brush up on them, but I guess that's the ebb and flow of baseball in the off season. There's some guys that fly overseas from here in the U.S. and then a whole bunch of others that come over here from foreign countries to play as well. Well, moving on to our next story here, also involves a trip that some major leaguers took down to Cuba in the past couple days. This past week was reported several major league players, including Dodgers' Yasiel Puig, who escaped, quote unquote, from Cuba. He was a Cuban defector, made the trip down to Cuba to see what's been happening down there now that the U.S. has smoothed some relations with them. Of course, since 1959, the U.S. has been on an opposite track of Cuba. Cuba sort of became a puppet of the communist Russia, so to speak. And ever since then, the relationship has not been good with the U.S., but all that seemed to change in the last 6 to 9 months. So all of a sudden, baseball is back in Cuba with a short tour, a goodwill tour, if you will. A lot of the players were meeting with youngsters and things like that over their goodwill tour of Cuba, including, of course, as I said, Yasiel Puig, another couple of other players that defected from Cuba, the Chicago White Sox Jose Abreu, and free agent infielder Alexi Ramirez. So a lot of these guys escaped Cuba and now are welcomed back as Major League Baseball players from America. So interesting how the world turns sometimes in politics. And it seems like I've lost Gary Mack from the feed here for the time being, so I'm going to just continue on and hope that he joins us back again here on the program. He evidently has had some issues connecting to the show here. So we'll wait for him to rejoin us. We've got a lot of baseball stories to go for you here on MLB This Week, the podcast. And I'm going to take a short break. We're going to listen to a commercial here, and hopefully Gary Mack will be back at the end of this commercial.
I'm back.
And we're back. Gary's back. I'm back. Talking baseball with you here, MLB This Week. After that short commercial break, I'm not too sure that even made it onto the show. But in any respect, Gary, nice to have you back on the show.
Well, it's nice to be back here. Apparently, somehow either I lost internet or something went wrong, but I do apologize for that. Still working with a new hookup here in the new office, and it's not entirely the best yet. And I'm trying to figure out the hardwire thing, but not having much luck so far. So hopefully by 2016 we'll have something going on.
Sounds good. Well, we're continuing on with the show, and as I said, I'm not too sure that commercial even came through. I didn't see any bars on there. Did you hear the commercial just playing, Gary?
I didn't hear anything because I lost completely the server, but I think there was something because I did hook onto Blab on the laptop over here, and I did hear something playing in the background, so I think it did go through to the main feed. But and if the people on Blab, I don't know if they can hear me, but
not sure that they can.
Maybe you can let me in the room, and we'll see what we get.
Let's see here. Okay, I see. There we go. I just put you in the room here. Are you still?
I'm still here. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure because, again, with our feed through Google Hangouts, I can see the audio, but with the Blab, I cannot. So we do have 6 people that stop by the Blab, and I want to thank them for stopping by and also tell them they can stop at our website, MLBThisWeek.com. Check us out on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, and also over at TuneIn.com. But moving on with the program here, our New Year's Day Christmas edition here, our last show of 2015. Another former MLB player is in the news, and this guy is actually coming back into the major leagues after being in prison for 34 months. A former first-round pick overall, draft pick Matt Bush, will be playing baseball again. The Texas Rangers signed Bush to a minor league deal on Friday. And Mr. Bush has the dubious distinction of being one of the biggest draft busts ever, as he was drafted in 2004 at the number 1 position. Never quite panned out. Was being converted over to a relief pitcher in 2007. He underwent Tommy John surgery and missed all of 2008. And then in 2009, all of his off-field issues started coming back to haunt him. Apparently got into a bit of a tough spot, a couple of fights before being he had an alcohol problem apparently, and hit a 72-year-old man in Florida who was on a motorcycle. So that gentleman barely survived the accident, and Bush also left the scene of the accident, and he had a suspended license at the time. All of this turned into a 51-month prison sentence for Bush, but the Texas Rangers feel that he needs to get back into baseball, trying to rewrite his life. The gentleman's father, Matt Bush's father, will be taking him to and from games. He does not have a license. If he makes the major league club, that is. The important thing to learn about this is, yeah, you're going to get a second chance maybe if somebody takes that chance with you. And the Texas Rangers are going to do that. No guarantee that he'll make the Texas Rangers baseball club. He has joined with a minor league contract, Gary.
Well, Rich, I guess everybody deserves a second chance, and they're certainly giving him that. It's a little, I don't know if you'd say crazy, but, compared to the story that we just did with Pete Rose, and here's a guy that went to jail for 51 months, and yet he's getting another shot. I don't know. I think Major League Baseball likes to pick and choose their villains or whoever, and apparently Pete Rose is a villain. And look, Matt Bush deserves a second chance. He deserves a chance to come back and see if he's got anything left at age 29 in the tank. But, it just seems strange the way they pick and choose who they're allowing in and not allowing in. And how about those Texas Rangers? I mean, they've got Josh Hamilton, and now this guy with his father watching him. I mean, are they going to have to hire a security team just to watch these players? It's it's not as bad as the NFL. At least, those guys are some of those teams are just ridiculous with the guys that they got playing there. But hey, look, I wish him good luck. I hope he can find his way back.
Yeah, that's for sure. I was thinking the same thing. The Texas Rangers are the equivalent of the halfway house for Major League Baseball. They've taken Josh Hamilton back in, and now Matt Bush. So, at least with the Christmas spirit and the holiday spirit, all combined, this is good news for him, and hopefully he will salvage part of his career at least. Always rooting for the underdog, usually, but and hopefully he's learned his lesson, because that was a terrible thing that he did, and apparently he was not a very nice person prior to that. So we'll get to see if he can make a major league ball club with the Rangers. He's not invited to spring training, so it'll be interesting to see how his career moves along in baseball. And Gary, you have a great story here next up. The Nationals and the Dodgers, two teams that were on everybody's radar to do well in 15, but maybe not so next season?
Well, Rich, I think if you have to look at the winter meetings and all of the trades and signings so far, I think it's fairly safe to say that some of the biggest losers of the offseason so far, it's still a long way to go, but so far, you'd have to look at the Nationals and the Dodgers as the big losers. The Dodgers losing Greinke and not signing Iwakuma, as we just talked about a few minutes ago. And the Nationals with this whole Brandon Phillips thing, is he going to go? They worked out a deal with the Reds, but rumor has it he turned it down. And now apparently he's asked for an extension to think about it. It's kind of a messy situation, and you would think that a team that finished second and won the division the last couple of times, talking about the Nationals, people would want to go there, but apparently it's not such a slam dunk anymore. And I think the whole game is changing. People used to want to go to the Yankees. Now it's not so much that they don't necessarily want to go. It's the pressure. It's this. It's that. Other teams have a chance to win, and I think that some of these teams that people used to want to go to as a free agent, now they're not so sure. Now they want more. If they can make almost as much money as going to a New York team or reasonably close, but they're playing in an atmosphere that they like, they're liable to pick that team. And I think it's a new phenomenon. It's just been the last few years. And I think a big loser of that may turn out to be Scott Boras, the agent Scott Boras, who everybody hates, it seems. And yes, he gets his players big contracts, but I'm not so sure Stephen Drew would agree with that. Of course, Stephen Drew was the famous case about 2 years ago, and I think we spoke about this last week. Turned down a qualifying offer with the Red Sox of like $14 million and hasn't made that much money since then in 3 years, signing smaller contracts to get back in, all because Boras kept him out, and he's not the first one to do it. Of course, Boras represents some of the biggest guys out there, but the latest example of this is Chris Davis. Chris Davis turned down 7 years, $150 million with the Baltimore Orioles in the thought that he could get 8 years, and over $200 million. And it's not happening. That market's not popping up. And he's got some other players too that are hanging out to dry. Just think, boy, if you get a guy like Chris Davis now, if he doesn't sign anywhere and goes into the season without a team and then, has to settle for a 1 year deal somewhere, if I was an agent, if I was a player or a parent of a player and he was, Boras came knocking around, I think I'd show him the back door. Yes, he gets these guys big money, but your talent's going to get you money anyway. And what is the sense for? I know it sounds ridiculous to say 1 more year and $50 million, but right now the market's not there. You liked it in Baltimore, Chris Davis. You played well in Baltimore. Why not take 7 years and $150 million? It's nothing to sneeze at. And it just seems a little ridiculous to me. And I'm not a Scott Boras fan. And, we'll see what happens with his players. But he's had taken guys down to the deadline here. And some of them, as I say, with Stephen Drew. And I think, was it Kendrys Morales was another one that was, hanging out there for a little bit and season or into the season, actually. And he may have gotten rid of Boras as his agent. I'm not sure. But look, there's a list as long as Boras has clients. There's also a list of guys that have gotten rid of him. So I think he could end up being one of the big losers this winter, as well as the National and the Dodgers.
Yeah, and as you said, those are some of the players that we know of that Boras has fooled around with to the end, to the trade deadline, things like that. There's a ton of other players that we don't know about with Boris, and he's not a good thing for baseball, I don't think. He's greedy, probably as greedy as you can get when it comes to agents. And I know their job is to try to get as much money as they can for players, but there comes a time when you have to say okay and agree to things that aren't necessarily the highest that you'll get all the time. And we'll have to just keep our eye on it and see what happens with that situation with those players. But yeah, Boris is probably one of the most despised representatives by the team aspect of baseball. Probably cost a few careers, much more than we know.
And you know, Rich, it's just the point of that. You know, people don't realize this. He keeps these guys out. For instance, like I said, with the Stephen Drew is the most blatant because he turned down a big contract, the qualifying offer to stay there for a year. And what did he make the following year with the Yankees? He made $5 million. You know, oh, that's nothing to sneeze at. Don't get me wrong, but he was offered, I think, the qualifying offer that 1 year was $14 million or something, and he signed for less than that with the Yankees, and signed for less last year. So I'm not even sure he made up that money in 2 years that the Red Sox had offered him for the 1 year, and that was on the advice of Boris. And all of his clients, it seems, have turned down the qualifying offers. And you know, this year we've seen where guys have accepted qualifying offers simply because they liked where they were playing, and maybe the numbers didn't work out, but they didn't want to leave either. So it's and Boris is in the forefront with this whole. He hates the qualifying offers, and he hates the draft pick being attached to a player that's a free agent that's signed, because that hurts his negotiating. And that's why a lot of his guys are either held over or don't sign, because he doesn't want to settle, I guess. But, you know, to me, I wish somebody offered me 7 years for $150 million. I'd settle and say, well, no, I want 8 years at $200 million. And I don't think Chris Davis is going to get $200 million. Because I don't think he's that. He's a good ball player, but look, Hayward didn't even get it, and I don't think he's as. You know, they're probably on a par. He's a better power hitter, Davis, but his numbers 2 years ago were not that good. He had a monster season in 2013. His 14 numbers were not that good. He had a very good season last year. But, you know, people are going back in time now and looking and saying 2 years ago you didn't have that good a season. So how do we know what we're going to get this year? We're going to get the 2015 and 13 Davis, or we're going to get the 2014 Davis. So he probably would have been better off to take the $150 million and
run to the bank.
And run to the bank. It's set. I mean, you can't be set on $150 million. The extra $50 million in a year is not going to be that big of a deal at the, you know, once you get to a certain point of money. But Boris doesn't want to settle for anything, and it seems that he doesn't like his players to go back to the team they were with, and that's a big mistake too, because he gets into these guys' heads, I think, and tell them they can make money elsewhere, and it's not out there. As you know, there's a lot of money getting thrown around this year, but it's not. You know, we still got a glut of outfielders in there. Think of this: Gordon, Cespedes, Upton, and now throw in there Chris Davis, and I mean the pitchers are the ones that are going this offseason. But the outfielders, it just seems to be, everybody thought once Hayward signed, that would open up the floodgates and everybody be signing. But boy, people are holding back in it, and they're actually talking about making trades instead. And these guys are hanging out there to dry. So that market's going to drop. And Chris Davis, I got a feeling he should have took that $150 million, because he's going to end up signing a 1-year deal somewhere, maybe back with the Orioles for like $20 20 million or something. And
which is like their $20.
yeah, exactly. But it's just crazy, and I admit I'm not a fan of Boris, so who knows though.
Well, one pitcher that is going to get paid in 2016, Johnny Cueto. Of course, he finished up the year with the Kansas City Royals last year, but he's going to be a San Francisco Giant in 2016. And I was reading some articles this afternoon on the big free agents from around the country, and I found this one in the San Francisco Examiner newspaper. It's been around since 1865 there in San Fran, and I thought this article was pretty much how I thought about Johnny Cueto. And the title of the headline by Jay Mariotti was, "Cueto must do more than quote unquote fool around." Starts off, his floppy dreads are bigger than he is, which is 5'10", going on 5'8". An ample belly at the core. He posts curious Instagram selfies atop horses, with rifles and gun shops, on couches, with his belt unfastened. To say his delivery is unorthodox is to forget it sometimes, is illegal. With a slow spin towards second base, giving batters a full look at his back, and then maybe a shimmy, if not a total against the rule stop. This much is true. Johnny Cueto is a showman and a character. So some interesting words there from a San Francisco sports columnist. And yeah, Cueto is kind of a weird guy. You saw him last year in the playoffs. Every end of an inning, he'd take off his hat and walk off the mound. And I've really never seen a pitcher do that during a baseball game, every time.
Well, he had to let all that hair escape, I guess. Maybe the hat was too tight. I don't know. I don't recall what did he get in salary, do you know? He got a nice contract, I'm sure, with the Giants. I don't see it right off the bat, but
got $130 million over a few years, but he has 2 years in which he can opt out of the contract. In other words, if he does better than he's supposed to, quote unquote, again, I don't know, 20-3 maybe, if he has a year like that. In 2 seasons, he could opt out and go for more money. 130 million is nothing to sneeze at, but I guess some of these guys are playing on what they've done the best the past season or next season, sort of like that. Teams are going to go out on a limb and offer him a lot more money. So he's got a 2-year option to opt out of that contract with the Giants. Not so sure that the Giants have the same option within 2 years. I don't believe that they could void that contract. They're stuck with him.
Well, the Giants are big on this even year thing, and I guess that's why they went after Cueto. Looking at Baseball Reference, in 2010, he was 12-7, and he's had his 2 best years in even years. 2012, he was 19-9. In 2014, he was 20-9. Rest of the years have been pretty mediocre, to be honest. He's 96-70 career. He was 4-7 last year with Kansas City after being traded. 11-13 overall. So, he better hunker down, but now he's got the big contract, and you wonder about a guy like that. Once he gets set with a big contract, is he going to fold up the tent and just enjoy the money and ride the horses and ride out into the sunset going out west? But I'm sure the Giants are a veteran team. They've got great leadership out there in Bochy and Posey and the other guys. And I do apologize at the beginning of the show. How did I forget Bumgarner in that rotation? It just completely slipped my mind. But hopefully those guys can keep him in line. But he is a bit of a weird dude, and we'll see what goes on. But the money's out there if you're a pitcher. He's just not the guy I would think would get that kind of money. But what do I know?
Well, we'll see in 2016 how Cueto works out for the San Francisco Giants. Did a pretty good job with the Royals. I don't think you can pin everything on him for their rise into the World Series and the victory there. It was more of a team effort with that team overall in 2015. But Cueto going to be with the Giants. A lot of other players moving around, and as Gary said, a lot more free agents, big-name free agents available, still on the market, looking for a team, and it's starting to get late. It's almost January. Before you know it, 6 weeks from now, we'll be talking spring training. That'll be starting, and not too much time left for those free agents to latch on to a new team and get ready and start playing some baseball. So we'll be keeping an eye out on the free agent market in the next couple weeks. And Gary, it was another great year. Our second year here of MLB This Week. We're toying around with changing the name to it. Not too sure. We haven't thought about that or talked about it in the recent past. But for now, it's been a great time for 2 years doing the show with you.
Certainly has, Rich. And we'll be back in one way or the other in 2016. So I want to take a moment just to thank everybody out there, all our listeners and viewers that for this past season. And thanks so much for tuning in. And I hope you'll consider going to Patreon and supporting the show. And I want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and most of all, a healthy and happy New Year.
And that about sums it up for MLB This Week. My thoughts exactly. Happy New Year, happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2016.